Tomorrow we have our say in deciding who should be sitting in the White House come January.
There was a time when an Oklahoman put himself before the nation and asked for its presidential votes, the only time that has ever happened. There are those who would tell you Fred Harris's campaign was folly, that he accomplished nothing except becoming the answer to a trivia question. But it's a safe bet those folks don't cotton to the common man and have never stood up for something they believe in.
And I believe that the fundamental problem in America is that too few people have all the money and power, and everybody else has very little of either, and that is not what Thomas Jefferson had in mind.
In 1976, after twice winning election to the United States Senate, Fred R. Harris of Walters, Oklahoma, launches a common man's campaign for the White House.
Sitting here in this old abandoned house where I lived when I was about in the first grade.
Railing on against wealth and privilege.
There's enough money to do what needs to be done in this country. If we take the rich off welfare.
Reporters tag him liberal.
I believe it's time that the government got back on the side of the people again.
He coins the phrase, new populist.
Populism, I think, just means that you're against concentrated economic and political power.
A kind of rural liberalism based on Southern culture and moral values.
Most people in America are having a hard time paying their bills, and they're entitled to have someone in the White House to speak for them.
He and wife LaDonna tour the country in a Winnebago. His campaign is financed with garage sales. He speaks in parks and from front porches.
It's a strange kind of situation where farmers are going broke as they are, while consumers can't afford to pay these food prices.
This land is your land.
Woody Guthrie's son Arlo gives him the rights to his father's most famous song.
By supporting Fred Harris for president in our Democratic primary, we can make this land our land again.
And in the Iowa caucus that year, it was good enough for a fourth-place finish, behind Indiana's Birch Bayh, Georgia's Jimmy Carter, and Uncommitted. No one paid attention to Fred's second-place showing the following week in the Oklahoma primary.
There's something wrong.
But in the meantime, we've lost weeks in New Hampshire, and we never were able to recover out of that.
Fourth place in New Hampshire doomed Fred Harris to a footnote. Out of money, desperate to pay off a second mortgage on his home, he ended up with 9 delegates at that year's party convention. But not a single regret.
I ran for president of the United States and said exactly what I believed.
Still teaching at the University of New Mexico, Fred and his wife of 25 years, Margaret Elliston, stay active bicycling, skiing, and hiking. He's become as iconic in New Mexican Democratic politics as the grizzled old cottonwoods that hang tough out here.
And New Mexico's fun because it's a small town and everybody knows everybody.
He's a prolific author, having penned 18 books and 3 best-selling mysteries set in Oklahoma. He's working on another mystery, an update of the Kerner Report, and his memoir is published in April by the OU Press.
Fiction, I like, you can make people do what you want them to do.
He can't shake politics. Fred's a party superdelegate, and 4 years ago I found him on the floor of the Democratic Convention. That old prairie fire still burns inside. He's still trying to get his country to catch up with him.
America's not going to be a stable and secure and safe society that affords us self-esteem unless we get at these problems of racism and poverty again.
His old message had been carried by a new messenger this year.
Children living on the street in America while ExxonMobil makes $40 billion.
I like John Edwards a great deal. John said to me one time, "You've always been my hero." And what I like is that he's the first person in 40 years, well, since me, I guess, who on the national scene has talked about poverty.
Still, the old populist is backing a new face.
I just felt like I couldn't turn my back on the first African-American who has a real chance to be elected president.
And what of what-ifs and might-have-beens? How would the country have fared with a President Fred Harris? Allow an old war horse to ponder the legacies of a presidency that never came to pass.
We would have had a health care system, a universal health care system, which is still so drastically needed. we'd had, I think, a lot smaller classrooms, better paid teachers, a much better education system. And we would have made a lot more progress on doing away with the poverty and discrimination on the basis of race.
That would have been quite a country.
We ought to be that kind of country, and we can be that kind of country. That's what people want.
Well, there's much more at newson6.com, including Fred Harris on his friendship, very close friendship with Robert Kennedy, his first impressions of Jimmy Carter, his solar-powered home in New Mexico, and how he might have retrofitted the White House to save energy, his presidential campaigns, of course, and his boundless optimism for the future of this country.